tier list for other speedrunners, beginner speedrunners, because I thought this would be a helpful thing on my channel. I know that a lot of people are doing stuff like this, but I thought I might just do one. Now, I've seen a lot of people struggle with this. That is a geode from 1.17 that hasn't come out yet. I have no idea what that can be used for in speedrunning. For all I know, it's useless, which is why I'm not going to be rating it at all. So the first thing I have to get clear is this is a buried treasure. I struggled with this the very first I was running. Wait, what is it? Because there's chests and all these, but it is buried treasure. So I'm not going to rate this. And then there's the different types of boats and bastions, and I'm just going to start from the beginning to the end. So this boat, I believe, doesn't have the back part, which does not have iron. So that would mean that it has a buried treasure map, I'm pretty sure, and a food chest. So if you're trying to go for world record, buried treasure isn't a very helpful thing because it slows you down because you might have to go out of your way. If it works out, then maybe it'll work, but it does kind of waste time a little bit. But for runners going for even sub 15s or sub 20s, it is pretty good, except for you don't get iron unless the buried treasure is kind of close and you can see it on the map. I would put this in maybe B tier because you kind of have to hire, actually, maybe A tier because buried treasure is a very useful thing, but I think I'm gonna keep it in B tier. Now the next is the Bastions. This is a treasure bastion, and personally, I really like treasure bastions. It's the route that I do best, but that's a personal opinion. And I think like a lot of speedrunners like treasure, but do like the other bastions as well, especially housing. I would put this in S because I'm just very confident in this, and this is sort of a tier list for other people, so I think I'll also put this in S because it's a consistent route that is also kind of safe if you know how to play it right, and it's not that hard to learn. And the next one is, I'm pretty sure this is Bridge. Yes, this is Bridge. Bridge is very slow, and I think the beginner speedrunners would like this, however, because the gold block are right there on the edge. I would honestly put this in about probably A tier. All the bastions are very good. They're very key in finishing a speedrun very quickly. It accelerates the time. So for beginner speedrunners and even sub 15 speedrunners, I would suggest this as an A tier because it's a very simple route. It's just very sort of slow. This is housing. Housing is a very good bastion. It's like every speedrunner's favorite bastion because it's fast, it's consistent. I would honestly put this in S tier. In S tier. If I can find it, there it is. So I would put this in S tier because it's fast, consistent, and it helps you get world records very fast. Stables is a little different because this kind of no in between place. It's either it gets really bad or it gets really good. So you could have bad gaps and it could be a completely trash bastion, or you could high roll it completely and get rewarded for it. So it's kind of like a chance. Considering the fact that you can still do decently well with a bad stables, I'd put it in A tier because it's kind of hard for beginner speedrunners to learn. This is the route that took me the longest to learn because I didn't understand it the best. That might have just been the people that I watched, but I would put this in A tier next to Bridge. Now the next one is Buried Treasure. Now Buried Treasure, those chests are stacked, but you do have to get out of your way sometimes to get Buried Treasure. I would honestly put this. I think I'll just put this in B tier because if you're going for world record, it's not a very good strategy unless it's already on your way and you can see yourself on the map. The next is desert temples. These are very good, but they can also be very bad, sort of like stables. Usually these are good because you can use the TNT, you can blow it up, you can get 9 pieces of TNT blown up, then you have 8 pieces of TNT, but you also have a lot of blocks and you also have a lot of cobblestone. In this I would actually put in probably A tier in behind this because it can also have a lot of iron. It can have diamonds, golden apples, notch apples, but it's on average it will have iron, which makes it a very important structure. I think this is one of my favorite structures in the overworld besides villages. The next is a desert village. Desert villages have food, but they do not have wood. So that's why a desert village and a temple combined can be very useful, because if you run and destroy dead bushes as you run just so you can get sticks, then you can automatically just get cobblestone tools from the desert temple and or iron tools. But by itself, if you spawn in the middle of the desert, you have no wood, you can't make a pickaxe, you can't make an axe, you can't make any tools, you can just have sticks. I would put this in B tier, except for the fact that it does have wood. Not wood, it has hay bales, so it does have food, and it also has a low chance to get a blacksmith because the size of a village blacksmith in the desert is quite large. And if you didn't know, the probability of a blacksmith spawning is dependent on how large the village house is, which is why the bigger the house of the blacksmith, the lower chance that it will be in a village because it takes up more space. That's why you usually don't see blacksmiths in Mesa villages, because if you see in one of Dream's manhunts, he gets a Mesa village with a blacksmith, and if you saw, that blacksmith was huge compared to other blacksmiths, so that's why it's extremely rare to find a blacksmith in Mesa villages. I've only seen one twice. The next is a desert well. I'm very tempted to put this in F. And to be honest, the only thing that's keeping me from not putting it in F is the fact that it has water, which means that if you're in the middle of the desert and there's no river, no lake nearby, and you're next to a lava pool and you have a bucket, an empty bucket, then you're going to need water to make a portal to the nether, which is the only thing keeping this from F tier, but otherwise it's pretty useless. Dungeons, these are also pretty useless. And while they can have iron, they can have a bucket even. They can have string. They can have bread and food. The thing is, if you're in a cave and you see one of these, get out of the cave unless you're trying to look for a lava pool, or if you already have a lava pool in mind for iron. You don't really want to be underground in a speed run doing this. Like, you don't want to be with nothing underground looking for a bucket out of a dungeon. So I would put these in the D tier. The next is fossils. This is an overworld fossil. Completely useless. It's rare and it's useless. So I would rate this an F because it doesn't even is used for speedrunning at all. This is a full boat. Full boats are nice because they do have a chest in the back with iron, emeralds, and ores. A chest in the front with food, and then there's also a buried treasure map. This I would honestly put in. I would put this in S tier actually, because you can have, this is like, if you start off with this, you're set for like the entire run. You have iron to get into the nether, you have food so you can survive the nether and survive through the run. You don't even need the buried treasure map, but it is useful if you don't get enough iron, and you on average get about 8 iron from a shipwreck, although it's not uncommon where you don't get 8 iron, but you almost 100%, almost 100%, that you will get at least 3 iron to make a bucket or something. The next is a boat that has its back part. This actually isn't that bad because it has the chest in the back that has ores and iron and emeralds. Of course, you only really need the iron. You don't have a food chest, and you don't have a buried treasure map, but I would rate this very good because it's very easy to get on with that, because you can just make bowls when you're at your spawn if you have wood, so that you can get mushroom stew in the nether, so food isn't really a problem as much as you think it would be. Iron is really just a key part of the run, so I'd put this in A tier. An igloo has, for those of you that don't know, has the chance to have a trapdoor underneath it that leads down to the basement, which has a zombie, a villager zombie, and a regular villager. And it also has a potion of weakness and a golden apple. And the golden apple can be useful, except for the fact that if you, by going down the ladder and going back up the ladder, takes so much time that, and it's just completely useless. I'm gonna put this in F tier because you don't use this in a speedrun. If you see this in a speedrunning, in while speedrunning, you just don't go for it. There's no iron, there's no tools, there's just a golden apple. if you're going for like a sub 30 time or just speedrunning in general, there's nothing in here that you could use except for a golden apple. Now, a jungle temple, those generally don't have good loot. They really don't. But they can have gold and string that you can get from the tripwires. Of course, if you're going for a bastion run, string is already pretty much taken care of, and if you're going for a bastion run, gold is also taken care of. And I guess if you aren't going for a bastion, then there is the possibility that you could get other ores, but these are pretty rare structures, and you don't want to be in a jungle during a speedrun. It's so hard to navigate. The only thing keeping this up is the fact that it can have ores to start you off. If you spawn right next to this in Dream speedrun, as he did in his most recent man, he spawned right next to this. If you do that, then you might as well, because there's a chance that you could high roll some iron. Then, okay, so this is a small portal with lava. This is good because the reason this is so good is because you can have a chest that can have food, most likely flint and steel or fire charge to light it, and it can have obsidian. The fact that it has lava means that you can go into the nether right there. You can also have iron nuggets so that you can make an iron pickaxe, or you can make a bucket, or other stuff like that. So as long as you get at least 27 nuggets, which is slightly uncommon. But these are very good. There's a gold block right there. That's 9 gold right there to trade with piglins. That's 9 piglin trades. So I would put this in about A tier because it's pretty good. The next is a mineshaft. Let me think. These are pretty useless. Like these three, like just the entrance to the mineshaft is pretty useless. The only thing I can think of is if you blind travel from the nether and you spawn in here, and you don't have string from the nether, it's very easy to get string from cobwebs, but it is also pretty useless. So I would put this in C tier. I would also put this in, I'd put both of these in C tier because the chest usually will only have like food, torches, rails. It's not going to have much. Sometimes it can have a golden apple, sometimes it can have diamonds, and sometimes it can have iron, but those are kind of rare. But if you do get those, then they're decent, but I would not suggest trying to specifically look for these in a speedrun. Now, fossils, you might actually underestimate because there's something called divine travel that was made recently where if this is in the 0, 0 chunk of the nether, you can find the angle of the stronghold. So it's not essentially a blind travel because you're not going in blind. So that's what's called divine travel, because the general area, if you blind travel with one of these, or divine travel, then you will be within 800 blocks, which is a decent blind, but 700 blocks is a trash divine. I've seen people get within 200 blocks, and that's an insane blind divine travel. So I would actually put these in S tier. But the fact that they rarely spawn in 0, 0 chunk, actually I'll put it in A tier. And sorry to people who don't use F3 Illumina, because then you won't be able to use these at all. But if you do use F3, and if you know how to divine travel, these are a very key thing in the run that can shave off like 3 minutes of running from a run. Okay, now ocean monuments are very good. If you notice that this back part here, if you have doors in one of these back parts, there will be underneath here the gold blocks, and that can mean that you can either skip a bastion, or if you're in 1.14, then you can trade with the cleric to get your pearls. But for 1.16 runs, these are actually very useful. But if you're going for a bastion, you don't really need these, and there's a chance that you could get miner fatigue. If you see a cow, you could get milk, or you could set your spawn and kill yourself. But in the very beginning of a run, if you don't have a bed, then you won't be able to do that. But it is uncommon if you're good enough to get out of here without being doinked, which means that you get the miner fatigue effect. So if you don't get the miner fatigue effect, you get out with gold blocks, and it's very helpful. So I would put these in about. These are actually. I would go to one of these. A tier. I'll put it in A tier. Above. I'll put it right below Desert Temple. Next we have a large ruined portal with lava. These have chests. They also have lava, so you can make a portal. But the one thing I don't like about these specifically is that the gold blocks are usually really high up. I don't want to waste like precious seconds going up there to get the gold block and then finishing a portal. But they are pretty good, and bastions are very common if you know how to look for them. So I would put these in about B tier. The fact that the gold block wastes so much time is the only thing that really brings it down. The next is this. If this doesn't have lava, so I would put this here because you can get gold blocks, you can get obsidian or fruit from the chest, but you can't finish the portal unless you high roll obsidian, and obsidian's kind of rare in portal chests, which is why this is in B tier because it doesn't have lava for you to make a portal. The next is a pillager outpost. Okay, pillager outposts are sort of a meme because you can high roll like strength, you can get carrots, you can get raw potatoes, you can get iron, but it's pretty uncommon in like pillager outpost. But the one thing about pillager outposts is that if you see one of these, that means there's a village nearby because the pillager outposts usually raid villages, which means that there is a village nearby. And since these stick out from the ground more than a village, you can know that there's a village nearby. If you go up here, you can spot the village. Of course, I wouldn't do this if you're going for a world record or sub 15, but if you're going for like a sub 20 time, then yeah, pillager outposts aren't that bad. They can be a good vantage point. The fact that they do mean that villages are nearby, and if you can't see the village, I'll put this in a, I'll put this in C. The fact that it says there's a village nearby is pretty much the only reason. Okay, plains villages, they're textbook. They're pretty easy to do because you have hay bales, you have an iron golem, you occasionally have a blacksmith. I've seen people get 4 blacksmiths, except that's the rarest thing that I've ever seen. There's usually there can sometimes be a blacksmith in here. You get wood from the sides of these houses. You get beds. You can to kill the end dragon. You can get a lot of stuff. I would put and it's sort of consistent. I would put this in. I'll put this in A tier. It's pretty good. I'm putting a lot of stuff in A tier, but they're pretty good. If there's a blacksmith, then it's A tier, but usually there isn't. So I'll put it in B tier. Because if you don't have a nether enter, then it's completely useless. But sometimes there can be a rune portal nearby, or there can be a lava pool nearby, or you can get or you can pull an alumina and you get 2 blacksmiths with obsidian in the chests. The next tier we have is a Mesa Village. These I would put in definitely A tier because there's a chance that you can get a bucket in the chest, and then you can kill the golem, so that ensures that you have an iron pickaxe and a bucket, and most likely a flint and steel. And then you can get wood from these, and they're very useful in 1.14 strats because you blow these up to get wood to trade for sticks. But in 1.16, these are also very useful anyway, so you can get iron pickaxes. So this is a snow village. These are pretty bad because you don't get food. You can get beds. You can occasionally get a blacksmith, but the thing is, you can't really use pie chart strats, which means that you F3 shift to make a pie chart. Because the thing is, what you look for is a furnace on that pie chart, but there's furnaces that naturally spawn in snowy villages. So of course, the blacksmiths aren't that big, which means that they can probably spawn. So, but it does sort of hamper your ability to reset because you have to go in, you have to check. So I would put these in about C tier because they're pretty bad because they don't have food, which is the bad thing. Witch huts, yeah, those are completely useless. They have nothing except like a cauldron. So these are completely useless. Do not go to these in a speedrun. You can use wood, but these only spawn in swamps, which means there's wood around you anyway. Okay, spruce villages. The reason that these are so incredibly popular, well, not necessarily popular, but good, is because their blacksmiths are the size of the regular houses. They're small, which means that you can get a lot of them. And if you have one blacksmith, like you almost 100% will always have one blacksmith if it's like a decently sized village. Because since the blacksmiths are small, they spawn more, and then the blacksmiths usually have iron, and these are just very good in general. I think I'll put these in S tier. The only thing bringing this down from S plus is the food. You don't have food, but beneath the campfires you can get a hay bale, and there can be plenty of campfires around covered with trapdoors. So if you bring down the trapdoor, break the hay bale, you can get 3 bread, and then you can just make mushroom stew in the nether. So food isn't really a problem. So these are very good, and I love these villages. Second only to these two are my favorite villages. The next is a ocean ruin. These can have these can have food. They can have leather armor. They can have buried treasure maps. They usually have buried treasure maps, but they're pretty bad. I would put these in C tier. I'd also put this in the C tier because they're really just really bad. Except for the buried treasure, and there's not even a 100% chance that you will get a buried treasure map. So this boat is a food boat. I would also put this in C tier, above these two because the boat has food, of course, but food is never really a problem. I'm gonna put this actually in the back because you don't get iron. You don't get enough iron to make a pickaxe or any of your tools, so these are pretty bad. Wooden mansions, I think, are overlooked a little bit. So, well, in speedrunning, you usually think these are useless, and they usually are. So that's why I would put, but I'm gonna put this, I was gonna put this in B tier for one reason. The Woodland Mansion, if you go to the roof, which is, in speedrunning, you don't really want to do that. I'm gonna put this in D tier, but let me just explain my thought process and why this is an F. If you go to the roof, and you put down a nether portal, the Woodland Mansion coordinates are often synced with fortress coordinates. So if you see a woodland mansion, you go to the top of it and put down another portal, you will most likely spawn near a fortress, which is why these are like sort of good, except speedrunners don't have 10 obsidian on them, and if they did and they had a lava pool, I would go for the lava pool so I could just blind shot easier. So this is sort of the tier list. I think I'm gonna move this up to S plus because this is one of the best things that you usually want to see in a run. So this is my tier list of what I think personally and what other people could benefit from.